Ready?
Sounds good. Going to hit go live now. All right, great, and I think we are live. Hello, IEEE-HKN community, and wherever you're joining us from, thank you for chiming in to the third episode of the HKN Connection. I am Joseph Green, one of your two HKN student governors for 2021, and over the course of today's episode, we have the privilege to talk with our guest, Ron Jensen, on the Board of Governors and its strategic plan for the coming years. In case you don't know our guest, Ron is a passionate leader and supporter within our IEEE community, and his impact has been quite the tour de force. Over the past decade, he's held many top positions within our organization, such as the IEEE USA President, IEEE-HKN Treasurer, a number of committee, chair, and volunteer posts, and his current undertaking as the 2021 IEEE-HKN President. In addition to his extensive career in IEEE, Ron is also a well-respected engineer at IBM, where he's held a number of technical and managerial positions over his 41-year career. Ron is a firm believer in giving back to our future engineering community and wears his passion on his sleeve, as evident through his extensive volunteer work within IEEE, as well as his appointment as an instructor at a university. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming Ron Jensen. Ron, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about HKN and where we're going and what we're doing, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me as well. I think we're going to have a profound conversation here, and I hope through this chat we can enlighten our viewers a little bit more about the Board of Governors, and maybe even encourage some of our viewers to run for a larger role in IEEE-HKN. To kick off the conversation, you've had quite a career in IEEE yourself, and I think we're lucky to have your insights as president for this coming year. Out of curiosity, what made you want to start running for IEEE USA and IEEE-HKN board positions?
So, yeah, it's interesting how you get involved, and I've been a volunteer for a long period of time, even like in youth sports when my kids were younger and all that sort of thing. And IEEE is made up of local sections throughout the world. There's 270 of them, I believe, around the world. And my local section happened to be looking for some leadership, and I was stupid enough to just say, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, I didn't even get asked personally, but I was interested in it, and I really liked what they were doing, and so I volunteered for it. And then, then you make those mistakes. So you say, hey, it seems to me that we could do this better. And darned if you don't get another job. It's how that seems to work. So anything, one thing led to another and another. And I've just enjoyed that experience all along, because you meet people that you would not run into normally, that aren't living in your community, but they're involved in IEEE, they're involved in technology and so forth. But I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet you unless it had been volunteering for this, if both of us hadn't volunteered. So I don't know whether that helps or not, but
no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your insight. I think it was a similar story how I ended up on the board. You end up a little too vocal on one of these things, and people take interest. But I hope that acts as a little bit of a charge. If you're passionate about IEEE-HKN, consider running for a position, There's many great opportunities for students, professionals, and anything in between out there. And we always love the help and volunteer work. And you never know. You might end up as IEEE USA president.
Yeah, exactly so. Yeah.
And to work into our talking points here, we've mentioned the Board of Governors a couple of times now, and some of our listeners might not be fully familiar with our Board of Governors. I know back when I was a chapter leader, I knew some tangential information, like, there was a student governor, there's a regional governor, there's Nancy, and she's the director, but the idea of these 13 highly talented individuals directing IEEE-HKN seemed a little bit of an enigma, and I was wondering if you could spend the first couple minutes of this episode here helping us clear up what is the Board of Governors and what's the different positions within the board.
Sure. So the Board of Governors is made up of 12 voting members, and then we often have additional people that actually participate in the Board of Governors meetings as well. And we, by the way, we hold monthly Board of Governors meetings, and so at that point, we're kind of kind of reviewing it to make sure that we're making progress and so forth. A lot of the work does not get it done directly at the Board of Governors meetings, but it's done by the governors and our various committees and so forth. So let me just kind of run through the 12 positions as the president, like myself. The past president, who was Ed Rezek, and he was president last year. And our president for 2022 will be Jim Conrad. Then we have four regional governors. There's IEEE as a whole is broken up into 10 regions around the world. And 6 of those regions are in the U.S. And so we kind of follow their pattern as well. And so we have 3 regional governors who represent those 6 regions in the U.S. And then we have another governor who represents Canada and all of the rest of the world, because primarily HKN was a U.S. organization, but is becoming part of IEEE about 10 years or so ago. We have expanded, and we're beginning to expand around the world. So lots of opportunity there. And then we have 4 governors at large that are that are elected. And then we have 2 of the best people, our student governors, Joe and Sandro, who are invaluable. I'm not even sure that Joe realizes how important he is to the Board of Governors, but your perception, your view of what HKN is and where it's going and so forth is just tremendously helpful. And then, of course, we not even a voting member of the Board of Governors, but we have a secretary and a treasurer. And then, of course, our all-important staff, Nancy and Stacy and Alice, have just been tremendously important to us. They're the ones that make the organization go. So does that help explain it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you did a great job walking through all of the positions. And just to explain a little bit more, you are our 2021 IEEE-HKN president. And there's implicit ideas of what that involves, but would you mind detailing your role a little bit more?
Sure. So there. How would you say it? So I have a responsibility for the agenda for the year, and we had a really neat way of developing our plans for 2021 for this year. We had a strategic planning committee that was very active last year. Developed a 1-page strategic plan, which I think we're going to show you in a little bit later. But as a result of that, then we expanded that out and said, okay, so if we're going to make the strategic plan take place, what is it we really need to do? And what are the various committees and so forth, the responsibilities and so forth that we need to distribute? And so that's kind of been my role in the preparation from last year to this year. And now that we're to this year, we kind of take a look at, okay, what are the highest priorities of all those things that we could be doing? And which ones can we afford to do, and which ones do we have volunteers and so forth to do as well? It's tremendously important, the number of volunteers and so forth that you have access to. So, and then it's my role then to make sure that we're really making progress at this. So, from a Board of Governors standpoint, it's my role to check in with the various committees and the committee chairs and the other governors as well, just to make sure that we're continuing to make progress and we don't have some holdup that is preventing things from moving forward. And if there is, whatever I can do to help remove those problem areas and so forth. So
that's awesome. Thanks for your answer. And I want to touch upon one of the points you mentioned. And it really seems like volunteers are truly the backbone of our organization here. That we might have, fancy board positions, but it's these people that step up to the plate and agree to work on these committees, which we'll talk about a little bit later more in detail, or assist in whatever capacity they can, really is what makes the IEEE-HKN wheels turn.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yes. It's amazing. We found over time, and I give a lot of credit to our director, Nancy Ostin, for identifying people that, that have the capability, that have the interest and so forth. And we've been able to bring people on board, as well as other people that have just, volunteered out of nowhere and, want to make a difference as well. And so those volunteers are the folks that actually make most of our programs happen. They may be enabled by staff or something like that, but it truly is the volunteers. And it's really interesting. I mentioned you and Sandro before as student governors, and previous student governors have continued on and stayed involved with us. Katie Brinker is a really good example of a person who got involved with us and continues to support us and make a big difference in what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like IEEE-HKN is definitely one of those organizations. The more you invest in, the more it will give back.
Absolutely.
So with that charge in mind, and to dive a little bit more into the main focus of this episode, we have our 2021 strategic plan. But before discussing 2021, I feel like we need to take a moment to acknowledge that 2020 was a difficult year for many of our members and chapters. I think the most mired ramification we have right now is some of our members are in a desperate need for a haircut like myself. But as we return to normal, what are the key lessons and challenges the board recognized and learned last year, and how are they going to be applied for this coming year?
That's it's really interesting, and I read a quote here not too long ago that it was actually written by a politician that's probably been used by a whole number of people over time, but never waste a good crisis, and never waste a good problem, because that teaches you that you can solve problems that you never thought you could before. And that certainly has been true in HKN, right? We had no concept before that that we were going to do virtual inductions. We had no concept that we were going to install new chapters or revive chapters and do them virtually. We had to have a replacement for our student leadership conference, and we ended up doing an HKN experience. Well, that would never have happened if it hadn't have been for a problem and so forth. And a lot of people refer to that as being a pivot and took a different direction and so forth. And that certainly is true from our standpoint. And then if you go on down even to the chapter level, right? How do you stay active as a chapter? How do you induct new students? How do you allow them to do their community service, that aspect of being inducted into HKN? We've all learned a whole lot of new things, and it's been invaluable. And some of those are going to continue even in a new normal. So it's exciting to me. I'm really thrilled by what's happened.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you've done a great job of looking at the silver lining of what is innately, not an ideal situation. And I think there's a lot of lessons about community building and how to effectively community build even when you're not in a physical location with other people, that it sounds like IEEE-HKN and our local chapters are able to learn from these experiences. I'm chapter president for the Kappa Sigma chapter at Boston University, and I've been shocked how willing people are to engage in these virtual events, even if they're not in the same location. We've done collaborative events with other universities or companies in different states, just as simple as a Zoom click away. And it's almost exciting having that, if you will, Pandora's box open, that now truly in this digital age, like the ward's your oyster. You can collaborate with people all over the ward and do some very cool stuff as IEEE-HKN members and chapters.
Yeah. You're exactly right. For an awful lot of people thought, well, the only way we could bring in that well-known speaker or whatever was to pay for transportation or find a time when he's in our local area or something like that. And now all of a sudden we're discovering that, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or whatever tool it might be, all of a sudden we now have access to people that before would have had to spend a day or two in order to make this happen. And now they can do it in an hour or so. And so it's actually given us a lot of opportunities to have access to people that we just didn't have before. So it's been great.
That's awesome. And I guess with that point in mind, I'm going to go through and do something dangerous. Change the window on the stream to pull up the strategic plan. So hopefully it just switched. Let me go double check that. Yeah, I think it looks like it's up. So if we want to start talking about the strategic plan, my question for you is, with that in mind, what's the board's goals for 2021?
Yeah, so let me just do a little bit of background on the strategic plan. IEEE developed a one-page strategic plan, and a year or so ago, And, of course, everybody was shared, with that. And we thought, this looks really interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to do a strategic plan, you put it in a notebook and then it sits on a shelf and nobody, everybody kind of ignores it for a long period of time. And, but on a one-page sort of thing, it very, very quickly gets to what are the real actions that are going on. And so, you see our mission statement, our vision statement. But then the interesting part is the stuff that's on the right-hand side, the IEEE-HKN will. And that kind of breaks it into what are those things that we will do if we're going to be a successful organization between now and 2025. We just said, let's look at it from a 5-year standpoint. So, and if you look at those statements, right, confer the honor of membership on those who distinguish themselves in scholarship, character, and attitude. Well, that focuses right back onto what the chapters are doing, right? And so how do we support them in order to make that sort of thing happen? How do we have successful chapters? And then the next one is provide professional career development and leadership training. And that's a little bit of what we have been doing in the past, right? Because we've obviously been trying to train chapter leaders and other volunteers and provide them materials and so forth. But we haven't done so much from a career standpoint. We've kind of let most of the activity with the inductees be at the chapter level and not so much coming from the HKN, from the organization level. And so we're beginning to make some changes and so forth, so that once you've been inducted and once you've graduated, there's still a relationship with HKN. We're still there to support you in your career and so forth. So. And then the third bullet was enable chapters to develop initiatives enhancing scholarship, service, character, and attitude. So, what is it we can do from from an HKN standpoint that'll help our chapter? And that's been our drive for 100 some years, and so we're continuing to push that. But we're in a different world that we were 100 years ago, and so it's a different way of looking at it and a different way of making it happen. And then our fourth bullet is about allocating resources, and resources are dollar standpoint is one aspect of it. Staff standpoint is another aspect of our resources and so forth. But those volunteers that we were talking about earlier in this conversation are really the folks that are important to us, and those volunteers and their chapters and so forth are key to it. So, and then our final bullet is provide a lifelong community connecting students and professionals. And I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, that we want to expand beyond just the student experience, just the university experience, and how do we get out beyond that? So that's kind of a background on there. And then what did you want me to talk about, what we were doing this year?
Yeah, sure. And to tie in maybe a question from the chat, Katie's actually in the chat. She asked a great question that we can tie into the strategic plan. What are some initiatives or programs students can look forward to in 2021? I know a lot of our viewer base are students, so it makes sense to focus a little bit on those programs.
Yeah. So there's a number of things that we're trying to do from a chapter standpoint. We're providing more training and so forth, right? So we've been doing a whole lot of things from, making it easier to be a volunteer and so forth, and making, just doing a better job of that training aspect. One of the things that we found is that those best practices. And HKN is kind of an unusual organization in that our chapters actually give us feedback and provide information about all of their activities and so forth. And it's amazing because I read most of them, not all of them perhaps, but most of them. And it's amazing that, the things that are going on in our various chapters and so forth. But not everybody is thinking the same thing. And so when you can pick out those good things and pass them on and let people know that there's new opportunities, there are new ways that you can, serve your university and you can serve your members and so forth as well. So we're doing a lot from that standpoint. And then, one of the things that, from a social media standpoint, whether it's a podcast like this or whether it's our various other channels and so forth, right? There's an awful lot we can do to support our chapters, providing the members and the volunteers with the information and so on. So maybe that helps, and maybe you even have a couple of thoughts about things that you've seen that we've been able to provide to chapters.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you touched upon a couple of great points there. And I'm going to ask one of our assistants here in the chat, so either Katie or Sandro might be able to post some information about the successful practices database that we've been working on. That could be a good tie-in. We've been investing a lot into an accessible database for chapter leaders, where we go through and select those successful practices to showcase them. And we also have a number of channels on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, now YouTube, not as a social media, but another platform. So if you have some sort of social media, it's probably an IEEE-HKN source on it. It's a great way to keep up to date with information. So I think you're right on. We're definitely trying new venues to try to spread useful information when it comes to sharing the ideas across our over 200 chapters. Because let me tell you, there's some great ideas. We've been going through some of these chapter activity reports ourselves, and we're thrilled to see what some of our IEEE-HKN chapters are able to hold.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention our Slack channels, and
thank you.
And then our monthly chapter leaders meetings and so forth, and we also have a faculty advisor meeting that takes place several times a year. All of them are aimed at providing support and giving help back into our chapters, making them successful.
That's great. And I know that there's a couple of initiatives in IEEE-HKN that might be able to tie into this conversation a little bit well. There's Pathways to Industry, for example, and we're working on a Pathways to Academia program. Would you be able to talk about those briefly?
Sure. So let me start with Pathways to Academia. Those students, obviously, the HKN inductees are a select group of people, right? They're very capable and so forth, and so it's likely that a lot of them are going to go on into academic careers, and so we have not spent a lot of time in the past helping that happen, but that's what we're trying to do now, is what is it we can do from a support standpoint for those students that are interested in going on into a master's and PhD programs, and perhaps staying at a university, or perhaps then getting their PhD and moving on to industry and so forth. So we're just trying to help from that standpoint. And part of it is even letting people know that there are opportunities and so forth that are available to them, and that's an important aspect of it, is from an academic standpoint. And then our Pathways to Industry is an awful lot of our inductees are going to end up in industry. And, again, being very highly qualified people, they wouldn't be an HKN inductee if they weren't. And so what can we do to help support them? What industries can we give them access into? How can we help them find that internship or find that future job and so forth that we want? And we have some real opportunities from that standpoint. We found a number of industries that are very interested in working with us, like TI, for instance,
Nice.
And supporting our activities.
Well, that's great. And it seems like there's quite a few student-geared initiatives that will be very helpful either in the near future or the far future. And to open up this conversation a little bit more, I know we talked about the long-term plan from a higher-up point of view in that strategic plan slide, but moving forward in the next 2 to 3 years, let's say, what sort of initiatives can alumni or grad students or even undergraduate students expect out of the Board of Governors?
Yeah, that's really grad students are a very interesting group, in that a lot of times the grad student may have been inducted when they were an undergrad and so forth, but then what is their role once they've gone to the next stage, and what is their role in the chapter and so forth. And some chapters have done an excellent job of keeping their grad students involved, and others kind of moved on, right? I mean, they just left it. And so we're taking a look at what we can do, because that's it's an amazing resource that we have available to us of those grad students. And so we're taking a look at what the programs and so forth that we could offer for grad students. Even includes, the inductee, the membership and so forth. There's a lot of grad students that didn't necessarily, they may have gone to a university that wasn't active from an HKN standpoint, or maybe they just weren't interested or couldn't afford the dues and so forth at that point in time. But they deserve to be recognized, and so we're trying to figure out how we can recognize more of those grad students. And then you mentioned alumni, and that's a little different situation because now they're out of the university and in some other form in their career. And we're taking a look at how can we maintain a connection with them, because we talked earlier about how important volunteers and so forth are to us. Well, there's a rich set of volunteers that are potentially available to us. And Nancy Ostin has mentioned a couple of times to me that our alumni is our most valuable resource, and I think she's absolutely right, because whether it's folks who have really made a name in industry but started out as an HKN student and give back to us, or perhaps it is someone like myself that simply was inducted and then went on and into industry and so forth, but has an interest and has time and resource and so forth that's available. And so we're trying to figure out what that program is going to be. And to do that, we're doing a technique called journey mapping. And I'm not sure everybody's familiar with journey mapping. It was actually a technique that was begun by businesses and so forth. What is the experience like when you're trying to buy something from Amazon, or you're trying to work with HKN and submit your chapter report and so forth. So you actually try and dig into this touch points and so forth that you have with that person, and then based off of that, you try and say, okay, well, what is it we really want it to be? What do we want that experience to be? And that's where we are right at the present time. We're beginning that journey mapping aspect of it, so that we can design what that experience will be and how it should function and how we'll actually get there in the finals.
That's great. And to maybe rearrange these questions here and tackle one of them now, it seems like a pertinent opportunity. If you are an alumni or a grad student that's interested in helping us flush out these different initiatives targeted at their groups respectively, what's the best way for them to get in contact with us? Or even if you're not one of those parties, if you're interested in giving feedback to the board or learning a little bit more, what ways do us as IEEE-HKN candidates or inductees have to reach out?
Yeah, well, obviously, contacting any one of the board of governors or our director, Nancy Ostin, works. And if somebody wants to put my email into the chat, that would be great. It's r.jensen@IEEE.org. And we're open to talking to people, or I'll even give you my cell phone number. It's 507-250-0022. Give me a call and we can have a chat, and maybe we can find something that's really of interest to you and you'd like to pursue and help us from that standpoint.
That's great. And one piece of information is, you mentioned the Slack channel earlier, and we have a number of different targeted channels on that Slack channel itself. So if you're a grad student or an alumni or an undergrad or whatever, if you could please consider joining the Slack channel, and we'll add you to the appropriate group. I know we have we just started a grad student conversation on the Slack channel itself, and we'd love to have some more people and feedback about the potential ideas we have floating around.
And I wasn't even aware of that, so thank you.
Yeah, we'll add you to the channel, get your insight. It would be great.
I'll have to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is a good segue. It's been great to hear a little bit more about the Board of Governors, its strategic plan, and where it's going over the course of these next couple of years. But to bridge the gap a little bit more between the Board of Governors and our local chapter, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what your goals personally are for this coming year, and what do you see as the most immediate issue to tackle for our chapters? So
there's a couple of questions that we have. From a chapter standpoint, we have some dormant chapters. Some that are not active and so forth. And so, one of the things that we would really like to address is reactivating them, because there's a number of students that should have an opportunity to become part of HKN and have this on their resume and so forth, that we're missing right at the present time. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that. And I mentioned earlier that we have 4 regional governors. And one of the things that we've been working on for the past period of time is trying to figure out how we can link those people into the chapters that are dormant within them. And we have some actually meetings coming up here in the near future that we'll start addressing that sort of thing. So that's one aspect of it. There's a number of other. Well, let's see. I was trying to figure out how to explain this, but ask your question again. Let me, and then I'll.
Yeah, sure. It was kind of 2 parts for it. The first part I think we started to address, which is your personal goals you'd like to bring for the coming year. And then the second aspect to it is, what do you think is the most immediate issue for our chapters to tackle? And this could be either in light of our strategic plan or in light of the pandemic and the variable reopening we're undergoing.
Yeah.
Really, whatever direction you want to take that questioning, I think could be quite enlightening for us.
Yeah. So everybody is talking about what the new normal is going to be, right? So what does that mean for HKN? And what does it mean at the universities? Because we're dependent upon the universities, and they're all figuring out what the new normal is going to be. Are they going to be in person this fall, or are they still going to be in a hybrid situation? What's the vaccination options and so forth that are going to be available? And it appears that college students are way down the list from a priority standpoint. And but what does that allow us to do? And so we're trying to figure out right now as to can we have a student leadership conference?
Yeah.
That would be in person. And normally that's at a university. Well, do we have universities that were willing to allow a bunch of outsiders to come into their bubble, so to speak, and present, and have a conference? So we're trying to figure out that sort of thing. And then we're also trying to figure out that, we have some new opportunities and so forth that have developed, the things that we've been able to do virtually. How much of that can we continue to support, and how do we do those sorts of things around the world? Because I mentioned to you before, we started out as a U.S. organization, and we've been expanding around the world, but we're not doing a great job of necessarily supporting those non-U.S. groups because they're in different countries, way different time zones and so forth. So, what might be a great time zone for us here in the U.S. now is not necessarily so in Italy or somewhere in China or somewhere else in the world. And so we've got a whole lot of opportunities and so forth that we can take advantage of that we've not been able to do in the past.
Got it. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you've hit a really good message here that regardless of where you are in the world, there's a couple of struggles that we're going to have to go through in recovering from the past year. And I think one message we can take away is, regardless of your time zone, regardless of your location, regardless of your degree of reopening, if you're struggling in some capacity, whether it's you're feeling not necessarily the most supportive as it stands right now, whether you're struggling to induct new members, whether you're struggling to hold events, or whether you're just looking for new ideas, reach out. Right. I think everyone on the board would be more than happy, whether it's your regional governor, whether it's Ron, whether it's the director, Nancy, or any other staff members, or, me and Sandra, the student governor. We'll get you in contact with the people you need. And I think one fun possibility that I'd like to see explored a little bit more is doing these international collaborations. Like, just because we're here and another chapter is in, let's say, Italy, let's pick a time that's good for both of us and do something fun together. You're only going to build lasting connections by doing this. So when in doubt, reach out.
Absolutely. A very good point, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess we've touched upon volunteering a little bit more readily, but let's say someone's not necessarily ready to run for a board position just yet, or is unsure what sort of position they would want to volunteer for, or even if they're thinking about becoming a chapter leader. What should interested parties or active participants do to best support the board in pursuing its agenda?
So there's probably several ways that we could look at that. We have a number of committees and so forth that that aren't as active, right? I mean, they may be an ad hoc committee, and so they'll work on a problem for 2 or 3 months, and then that commitment is over, and so it's a lower level of commitment. There are lots of those sorts of things that are available and so forth, and you may actually have an idea of something that needs to be addressed, and that could turn into an ad hoc, right?
Yeah,
it
definitely.
could turn into a small group that goes off and says, okay, so what do we do with this? How could we improve the situation, or what materials could we develop or provide, or that sort of thing. And so there's lots of opportunities to volunteer at different levels, and it can even be to the aspect of what do we do from an SLC standpoint? Well, what are the opportunities that we have for an SLC? Could it be a hybrid one this year? And what are the opportunities does that give us? Additional speaker, perhaps, that we couldn't get to a campus, but perhaps we can do virtually. But those ideas have to come from somebody. And, just depending on a few people is not the best way to do it. So whether you provide it to us on one of the Slack channels, or you send us an email, or whatever it might be, contribute at whatever level you can.
Definitely. And Nancy put into the chat here, I'd like to bring some attention to it, that right now it looks like we're looking for volunteers to help us in the journey mapping experience for alumni, which, as we mentioned, is a very important part of our next couple of years of development. And as well, we're looking for individuals who are willing to help us review for the best practices databases, so helping us organize the chapter activity reports and publicize them for everyone else. So if you're interested in getting a little bit more involved, these seem like great pertinent opportunities that you can sign up for. And again, feel free to email any of us, whether it's me, Ron, Nancy, etc. Oh, and Nancy even put a list of HKN committees in the chat, which is great. Speaking of resources, such as a list of committees for people who are interested, what happens if one of our listeners wants to learn more? They want to investigate a committee to see if they're interested in joining, they want to read more about the board's strategic plan, or simply get to know us as the Board of Governors a little better. What resources do we have on hand?
So obviously our social media channels, right? I mean, we're going to try and respond to anything that shows up there. Email is also, I'm always willing to share my email with people. And so if you want to contact me that way, or, call me, or whatever it might be, and other Board of Governors are also willing to do this sort of thing. So whatever makes it easiest for you to reach out to us and let us know what you're interested in, what you might like, how you might like to participate, or what you might want to learn, whether it's more about our strategic plan, or perhaps it's what are our event plans for this year, and how can you participate?
Great, and thank you so much, Ron. We're coming just about up to the time limit we have for this episode, but I want to take a brief minute here and see if any of our viewers want to ask us a question. Ron's a great wealth of resources, and I think this would be a great chance to learn a little bit more about him, or answer your questions about the board, or answer any questions about the strategic plan. So give it a couple seconds here to see if someone posted in the chat, and if not, I have a couple of follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
I guess as we're waiting, and to ask you one real quick here, as you mentioned in your introduction, you've held a number of positions in IEEE and IEEE-HKN, and from your perspective, what do you see as your greatest successes from the Board of Governors over the past few years?
The thing that I've really enjoyed, and I've been involved with the HKN Board of Governors for about the last 6 years now.
Yeah.
And I came on as a treasurer because we were struggling from a financial standpoint, and I had the opportunity to.
Got it.
The president at that point in time asked me if I would, if I would volunteer to help out. And I said, absolutely. That had been my only volunteer relationship with HKN since I was a student. And so I took that, and then as a result of that, we've kind of continued to be developing the strength of our board of governors and our committees and so forth over the past 6 years. And I feel like we've just made a tremendous amount of progress on the quality of people that we have that are involved in our board of governors, the people that we've been able to nominate and have elected and so forth, or the people that we found for our various committees and so forth. And it's by reaching out like this, that people become aware of us, and are aware of the opportunities and say, hey, that'd be interesting. That'd be worth a few hours of my time to help contribute from that standpoint. And so the organization strength, I think, has just been invaluable. And as a result of that, then that means our committees have been much more active, and they've been developing new materials, new ways of whether it's communicating with people, like we've talked about the Slack channels and that sort of stuff. Well, 10 years ago, that wouldn't happen, right? So, we have to continue to change and respond to the world of today.
For sure. And I appreciate your insight into how our organization has changed and, if you will, matured over the last couple of years. In fear of going a little bit over, I want to tackle our last question in the chat here, which is from Katie. And this might be the hardest one of the episodes, so feel free to give some
Katie,
time for thought.
Katie.
What is your favorite HKN memory?
Wow, that's interesting. So I would say the most interesting things have been our student leadership conferences. I've been to a couple of them. Okay, and one of them happened to be in Boston.
Yeah, at Tufts.
And Tufts at Tufts, and another one was in Florida. And it is really interesting to go there because you're surrounded. Okay, there's a few of us, mature adults who are there, but primarily it is students at one level or another, and it is just energy is just exciting. It is just so much fun to talk with people and learn a little bit more about them and their university and what they're studying and so forth. Even take our personal conversations, Joe, right? That conversation, you just learn a lot about people, and you learn about what the opportunities and so forth are in the future. And so I think those student leadership conferences have just been the greatest experience, and it's been a lot of fun. And leave it to Katie to ask a really good question. So thank you.
For sure. And I'm always surprised how many people, when we ask that question, say the Student Leadership Conference or the HKN experience last year. I know for me, the first time I really engaged with IEEE-HKN, just to synergize with you for a second, on larger than a chapter scale, we'll say, was when our e-board participated in the host committee for the 2019 Student Leadership Conference at Tufts.
Absolutely.
And it was a mind-blowing moment. I remember taking a step back at one point and seeing all those people in that room and all the workshops and ideas flowing amongst us from all over the country and ward, and just being like, wow, I'm part of something really cool here. So I think we can both highly recommend, if you get a chance to participate in one of these large events, whether it's a student leadership conference or a HKN experience, take advantage of it. Right.
And unfortunately, the bad part about the SLC is that there's kind of a limited number of people who can attend, right? I mean, compared to the number of inductees that we have every year, not everybody is going to have that opportunity to participate in it. And so now we're trying to figure out, okay, so how do we give a little bit of that experience to those people that can't be at an in-person conference because of a pandemic or because of experiences, they're just the cost and timing and so forth. So we're trying to figure out how to provide some of that, those aspects of that experience to everyone.
For sure. I think the HKN experience was a great step in that direction, but it seems like we've gone a little over time here, so I think we'll end the episode there. But first and foremost, thank you so much, Ron. This was a great conversation, and I for one, learned quite a lot about the Board of Governors and where we're going over the course of this next year. And I hope everyone involved in this podcast has had a similar experience. So thanks for your time, and as Nancy would say, have an Eta Kappa new day. Thank you, Ron.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.